Welcome back, loves. We are so excited to be here today. And of course, I have Connie with us for our first video podcast ever. We're so excited with enough requests.
I'm a little nervous.
No, we're gonna be fine. We're just gonna be like we normally are when we have our conversations and talk about everything. So today we are going to talk about personal boundaries in our relationships, which is so important because so many times we are talking to people about setting, the right mindset to be in the right space and the right mentality, which is so important to be able to really have those relationships that we desire and want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people, this is kind of coming back into what we have spoken about, I think it was in last week's podcast, of making yourself a priority, making the other person a priority, but also how to set those boundaries. So I feel like it's all a little confusing. I think we all know that relationships don't come easy.
Right.
But with some hard work and some good tips, then they can flow smoothly. So we're going to talk about how boundaries can be put in place on yourself and how you also need to still prioritize yourself in a relationship.
Right. So boundary number one needs to be understanding yourself. Having a really good description of not being wishy-washy when asked questions. This is just kind of in general in life, but when it comes to thinking about either attracting a relationship or being in the relationship you're in, maybe the reason why you don't have boundaries is because you haven't figured out how to be able to articulate what those boundaries are that you actually know you need. I think so many times Connie and I'll have this conversation and now the holiday season is starting to come up and we're getting so busy and we're saying yes to so many things, and it's like you need your own accountability checkpoint. What no one else can do for you other than you and God having those moments where you say, I'm going to take something off my list. I'm going to say no to something. I'm going to really set those boundaries that I know myself, because if you're not good enough yourself, you're not going to be good for anybody that loves you.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a little bit before, being an extrovert and introvert, but you still always need time to refuel yourself. You can't constantly give and not have it in return. So I think that's something say in a relationship that you are doing all these fun dates together, you're going out there, it's a great time, but also then you're working really hard, you might have children, I don't know, I think all of us have plenty of things in life that keep us busy.
Right.
And then when it comes to dating, you're also trying to prioritize that as well, but you still have to remember to step back and fuel yourself, otherwise you're going to have nothing to give. Dating is so time consuming, especially someone said to me once, being a wife is a full-time job. Before I was married, this is. And I was like, no, it's not. Now
life should get easier because now you have somebody to help you with the task, right?
Yeah.
But now you have double the amount of tasks.
Exactly, but now I realize it truly is a full-time job. So if you don't put that effort into yourself too, you're not going to be the best you for your person either. And that's even early dating is even more, I think, extreme with that, because it's like, okay, we got to see each other more than once a week, we got to see each other now every so often. Then when you're newly dating, it's not a 30-minute date, it should be hours,
right? It should be endless. You should lose track of time when it's obviously that magical and the right person. And I think to piggyback off what you just even said too, Connie, is that it is so important that when we're single, most people have a really active social calendar. Why? Because you don't have to ask anybody else about their calendar or their schedule. You can do whatever you want to do. You can commit to whatever you want. And nobody wants to be home lonely, sitting there feeling lonely, right? Yeah. So you put a lot on your calendar, but I think it's also, like we always say, it's so important when you're single to read marriage-minded books so that you practice yourself to be in a healthy marriage when you find it. Same thing when you're single. It's really important to start to put in room for someone to come into your life so that you can date. I'm not saying then do nothing 3 days a week and expect God's going to drop some magical man or woman on your lap and there you go, you have that room, you still have to definitely put in the effort, you still have to but if everybody was to take one thing off their calendar or just put a little bit more me time to be emotionally fit, I say, or just mentally stable or sane or be a better person, we'd be that much better at reflection, we'd be that much better at communication. Yeah. And I think it's just so important that when we're talking to clients, right, and we're interviewing all of these people and we're about to do this introduction and we're so excited, and then something comes up in somebody's world, something we can't control, or they forgot about this, or they forgot about that, or like, heaven forbid, somebody gets sick, or whatever it is, and then we're sitting there and we're kind of waiting, and it's like at the end of the day, sometimes people don't think they're as busy as they actually are.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Or, I mean, also figure out what is the right, like, good timing for you. Like, some people, I know me and Renee talk about this, because
Right.
I need time also on, like, I need time on my own, like, purely on my own to be a good version of me. I need to be on my own, even whether it's going to the grocery store on my own, doing something so simple on my own, and everyone's different, so whatever it may be on your own, you still have to remember to make, like Renee said, I mean, we're calendar people, so I don't want to push the calendar on anyone.
Right.
But put that time on the calendar if you need it, or if you are then really social, then also put that time into your dating life, you know? Even if you aren't dating, prioritize, like Renee said, okay, take a time, take an hour of your evening, 30 minutes, heck, anything you can get, right? Mm-hmm. To put your mind in that relationship mindset, basically.
Right, yeah. And I think the other thing, so I would say for that's tip one, boundary, direction number one, yourself. Put that oxygen mask on yourself. And it's amazing when you start to think that way, which we just did a podcast on being too selfish and then too selfless, right? So this ties into the same topic, is that, like, at the end of the day, it feels selfish to be putting that oxygen mask on yourself. However, if you don't do that, you can't help anybody else, and so that's how it's a spiral effect. And then people, feel used, or they feel exhausted, or they feel defeated. And why is that? It's not because of anything in your surrounding. It's truly because of you.
And when you're going on too many dates, this is something that's almost like a pet peeve to me. When people say, hey, I'm ready to come to you for our services, but I've gone on at least 5 dates a week. And I'm like, well, how do you have time for that, number one? And you're not prioritizing it. You're not making it a priority. You're going out with...
How are you getting to know 5 people at once? It's virtually impossible.
Yeah, how are you, how are you going to be the best version of yourself when you're going on 5 dates, 5 different women, and 5 different, or men, whatever, vice versa, women do it too. But, also, you can't do it. So you need to just be very, it's already hard to start a relationship, and we don't downplay that at all. But, put the time in right. Like, if you're going on a date, make sure that you're not, and this is also another pet peeve of mine, that people do, I only have 30 minutes for this date, I'll just go out and then we'll see how it goes. Right. No, you should have the whole rest of your night
open. And I always say, in those cases, if it doesn't go how you thought, then, start looking for reasons of why you've been spending this time together outside of thinking maybe this might not turn into a romantic relationship. But the more time you spend with somebody, the more you're being emotionally curious about who this person is as a human being. Yeah. That then if it doesn't work out, that's somebody else that now knows you, that's raving about you out there. It's like a win-win, And I think that it's so important when, like what Connie's talking about, is that you really just are able to be fully present.
Yeah.
Because what is a waste of time is not going into everything, with the opportunity, with the mindset that this could be something. And like you said, timing, and we did a whole podcast on this, is like, the time has to be right. Yeah. So when people, especially in the holiday season coming up, are pressuring you, are you dating anybody yet? Are you married? Are you whatever? And like, we have clients that will freeze their accounts because we basically take them off. We say, you have too much on your plate. Yeah. This is not sexy. Like, at the end of the day, people that want a romantic relationship, they have to have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that would definitely be tip boundary number one. The other boundary that I know we were talking about prior to leading into this entire subject is it's so important that we're also setting boundaries among our friends and family and other individuals, because the reality of it is, all of us have maybe that one friend or that one family member or that one person that just always has something going on. Yes. And we're constantly we're needing to set those boundaries of, instead of you're so busy, obviously you can use that as an excuse, but to also say, I can meet with you in 2 to 3 weeks. And then set that time or that limit for an hour. Because the reality of it is the majority of people that are going through a lot is they need time to self-reflect. They don't need time to keep calling more friends and talking it out with more people and getting a bunch of opinions and they're missing like the facts, the details, and people, I mean, it's that famous saying, you know, on the word assumption, like, you know, make an ass out of you and I. So like when people are making all these assumptions and people are talking to their friends and their family, they're really not getting that like clear message that you need to do too for your own psyche to have that boundary of time apart.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I just feel like I'm saying, going back to the calendar, but put it on the calendar and don't do anything else. Like people are like, oh, you know, there's clients that we've had to like work on with this. They're like, I do a lot of self-reflecting. I'm like, okay, what do you do in that time? Well, I start off self-reflecting, but then I take a work call, then I call a friend, then I do this, then I do that. Like we literally mean devote that time. And it's hard. It is really hard. Me and Renee and anyone that listens to our podcast already know this about us, that we are extreme planners, but also very busy. So even have worked and still working, I don't know, I'm definitely still working on it. But when you put that on your calendar, that self-reflection, make sure you are actually doing it. Turn your phone off. I don't know, make yourself a cup of tea, coffee, whatever. Like, put yourself in
that time aside, and for your own self, stick to it.
Yeah, and don't like do it.
If you want to be the best version of yourself, you've got to stick to that like time.
Yeah, and say you're a mom and you're in the like you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this time in the kitchen, but in the back of your mind, you have dishes to do. You have this like. Do it also in like a safe space or an environment that's peaceful to you, that has no distractions, because I guarantee you, if you are a mom and sat in the kitchen and doing it and there's dishes, that's all you're subconsciously going to be thinking about. So you need to make sure that you also do it in an environment that's safe. You have the tools that you may need. So, I mean, whether it's talking to a therapist, counselor, or you have, I don't know, people always like write things down. We always say that's a good thing, like write where your valuable time is going as well. Like if you need a task to do in that time, do it.
Right. And having, you know, I think a lot of us learned through COVID and everything else, we started to learn really like who our true friends are, because you couldn't just see everybody easily, and you weren't doing as many events as we're starting to do again. And I think if anything, it helped set the refresh button on a lot of individuals. And there's some people that like continuously have these relationships that then are not able to cut the ties. And I think it's really important. The one thing you can do as a friend, as a lover, as a mate, you know, like all these things as a parent, is to communicate in a like neutral setting. And that's why we always call it couch talk. Like put the couch talk on the calendar. We're always talking about the calendar, but like where it's like two people are coming together and saying, I love and adore you. However, this is where things like get challenging for me, because I don't want to see you keep beating yourself up over these relationships, or you've been breaking up with this person off and on, and you just like, at the end of the day, how many more breakups are you going to have? And just face the reality that I love you and I'm going to be here for you, but I can't see you keep hitting your head against the wall in this situation. And so I think, I mean, everything we know, the power of communication is key.
Yeah.
And so mastering that and actually being the bigger person to be able to set that boundary and start that conversation, it's amazing what happens when you start communicating like that.
Yeah, and when you also learn how to communicate as well, I'd say, like, we're talking about boundaries, so some people don't know how to say no. Like, they're like, I can't say no, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I am.
We're victims.
I'm
guilty of it
terrible at doing this.
I'm
so terrible at doing this. So I'll put my hands up, and I should listen to my own advice. But another thing, we all have something to work on, right? And none of us are perfect.
Right.
We know that. But say no, and if you don't know how to say no, like, learn how to say no. Like, I mean, there's so many resources. You can even just practice in your mind. Like, start first saying no to, if you have children, like, it's the simple things of like, okay, I'm just going to say no to, I mean, we all know people that have like, if they're like, oh, you know, here's some water, and they're like, yeah, sure, although they've never wanted the water. Like, start off with like just saying no to that kind of thing, and then you'll slowly grow yourself up to be like, actually, no, I don't have time for dinner and tonight. And someone say, well, why? I have to have my self-reflection time. And that's so hard, because it's easy to say when you're like, actually, I have something else on the calendar, but it's so hard to say when you're like, actually just need to do something. I think it was a few weeks ago with you, Renee. I was like, I know, I need to literally lock myself in the house. I need some downtime.
Right, which is true. And I was never offended because why? You're open and honest. I get it of all people. And it was like, good, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, and she was like, I hope you had a rechargeable weekend. But it's so hard to do that. I mean, I remember even thinking, I'll just go for a little bit. But then you're like, no, I'm like, Connie, you have to
take
like
that break in your time to be like reflective and by yourself.
Yeah, so it's so hard, and we get it. It's harder said than done. Is that the same? Yeah.
Easier said than done, I think.
Yeah, easier. That's the one I was going for.
But, and I think that too, you know, if you're somebody that's super social or you're somebody that's more introverted, the reality of it is like, you know, and so I think when it comes to like, even when we have clients come in or we have matches that we're interviewing or just in general, we're always talking to people, is it setting those expectations really up out of the gate or up front, or even when you're in your holiday dinners and parties and things like that, is, you know, when you get those one-on-one conversations, instead of like being so surface, use that opportunity to actually talk to somebody that you're going to connect with. If you walk away from a party or an event and you have a meaningful conversation with somebody that you've never had before, and that's the only conversation you have, you've done good.
Yeah.
Because that's only going to help set up that friendship and relationship. And if it's something that's difficult to talk about, which we did a podcast on this, then say, you know what, I just want to share something that like I'd love to get back together like in the next couple of days and discuss it again. Yeah. I did that with a lunch with a dear friend just a couple of weeks ago, and there was something that he shared that was, I had no idea. And it took months to get to that point to share something with me, and it was like eye-opening. And I said, okay, well, and we ran out of time because it was lunch, and I said, but let's get together in 72 hours and talk about it again if we need to. And we both followed up after that, and I was like, oh my gosh, that weight lifted off their shoulders, you know, or whatever, the elephant on their shoulders, or whatever they say, or weight. And I think it's so important that we're doing those things, because that can weigh on people for years and years and years and years. And then I think the other thing that's really important is behavioral boundaries.
Yes.
Which some of us, our audience members, and many people that we talk to and interview all day long, the challenges they've gone through in past relationships that continuously surface or haunt them. Yeah. Or they start to feel guilty as if they did something wrong.
Yeah.
And so it's like a boundary that's like the past that keeps coming into the future that you can't let go.
Yeah.
So I know when we talk and we interview people, and our job is to find emotionally fit, mentally stable, you know, securely ready for a relationship. It's really important too when we dive into some of those things with questions, how people will say, well, I've actually never really overcome that. And we're like, okay, let's work on that. Yeah. Because it's so important to do that before you get into a relationship with anybody, really. Yes. And obviously we're here to talk about romantic relationships, but we also need to practice those among our friends. So if there's certain things that we're like, we have a fear of like talking to somebody new, we get super nervous, we get tongue-tied, like figure out why all of that comes from. And a lot of it is, and we're not going to get into a whole nother topic here, but it comes from some type of insecurity or lack of confidence that's happened in your life.
Yeah.
So it's so important too, when we're talking about boundaries, is setting that time apart to like discover what like little triggers you might be putting out there that's also attracting that type of person, maybe because it's confidence, maybe it's, and you're allowing yourself to be treated a certain way because they've never overcome that boundary of confidence.
Yeah, and also talking about be confident in doing so. So if you know there's something that bothers you, like you're insecure talking to someone new, or, you know, in the dating world, I don't know, we've talked about this, word vomit every first date. Like, if you know, like, be confident, like, own it, be like, okay, this is the problem, let's figure it out. Like, it's okay. I just think it's better to own it, be confident, so then you can find an answer. And it's the same with what we're talking about with family too, right? If your family's like, oh, why are you single on your holidays, or what? And be confident about it. Be like, yeah, but I'm really working towards it. Like, I think in everything you do in setting those boundaries is be confident while doing so. So even if you are shy and scared on every first date, then be like, yes, I am shying, but I'm working on it. Like, it's a work in progress. And I think when you kind of own your flaws, right? Like, when you own your flaws, you're so much closer to that end goal of overcoming them than what you ever were. Instead of being like, actually, I'm shy, I don't want to talk about it. Instead, own it, and then you're
and like in the same
closer.
thing when you start a new relationship, or today is the first day of forever if you are in a relationship and you've never tried this before. We hope you take these techniques, you share these, podcasts with your friends, your family, your love, or, every person that matters to you. So it takes two people to understand and respect these styles of communications that we're always doing on these podcasts. And the reality of it is like, especially if you're starting a new relationship or you're already in a relationship, is saying from today going forward, what's not working is that we're not setting boundaries, and I need you to do this a little bit more for me so that I can understand you better. And sometimes the problem is people don't ever want to talk about anything.
Yeah, and
so then
also,
time goes by and it's never resolved.
100%. And also start with, don't blame someone. Take it and say, this is how I feel. Like, let's get past the boundary of talking about it. And everyone goes into either communication, and that's how so many people turn from just talking to arguing, because they
or not talking at all.
Or not talking at all, because they go in, you did this, you did this.
Very accusative.
Yeah, and so that's like those boundaries. Set those boundaries within yourself. Okay, I'm going to go into this conversation not blaming them. I'm going to say, this is how it makes me feel because. And it sounds so simple, It sounds so simple, but it's also another thing that's easier said than done. When we're frustrated, when it's hard to put those boundaries in place, we just go in and blame other people. So if we say, okay, I'm going in with the boundary that I'm not blaming other people, I'm not blaming my other partner, I'm not blaming maybe someone I'm dating, being like, oh, I don't really like this, be like, this makes me feel this way because, and
you stop blaming yourself too for reasons of why you can't do this. Give yourself more credit than, like as you were saying, credit due, because you ultimately are the superior of your own self to be the best version out there.
Yeah. So just put those boundaries in place in all areas of your life. Like we said, relationships, but also friends and family too. It's just constant reminder to put those boundaries and put them in all areas. And they don't have to be a wall, not a wall, but just places and set that,
Yeah, and start with one or two. I think the other thing is people then see all these things and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. Where do I start?
Yeah.
So start on one. Work your way up. Yeah. And then I always say it's amazing how when you know all these things about yourself and you communicate that with others, how the relationships grow that much stronger as we grow in knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it's so important that that you listen to these things, that you put them into practice, that you share these things, because the more people practicing the same things that you're learning that we're teaching, the world will become a happier, more loving place, is what we say. So I always hate how fast these podcasts go. I always feel like, and now that we've got like an actual person in-house doing this with us, Nikki's flashing at us, you're over your time.
Yeah. I'm the worst.
I know. So we hope that you've enjoyed, obviously, this chat and conversation. We always love it when everybody writes in and gives us topics to talk about. So thank you to the audience person that had written in this question talking about boundaries and how you can make it through the holidays. So we're going to love and leave you and hope you have a blessed day.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God, please don't tell me that.